It's an honor to have all of you here, seriously, and it's an honor for me to be speaking at this wonderful institution, which is devoted to such an important mission in the world. So it's a real source of pride that I can be welcomed here, not just by the Harvard alumni, but by the Clinton School. So thank you all for being here, and for the distinguished guests that were mentioned here. I'm honored that you showed up to listen to me. Okay, so the big question is, what is the impact on higher education of the fact that the internet exists and information communication costs are virtually nil at this point, right? That's the big frame here. What's going to happen to the university as a result? And the universities are changing, but they're changing slowly. So in the second half of the talk, I'm going to actually talk some about reinventing a classroom in a course that I taught, but it really lays the issues around the internet and the classroom raise larger questions about the purpose of higher education. And to my way of thinking, if I can just say it in a nutshell, the question before us is whether we are going to take advantage of the freedom that we have because of the mass communication of information. The fact that, we can all get anything we want on our cell phones, right? Some of you probably by the middle of the talk will be doing that instead of listening to me. Or is it going to be actually make us into a more rigid educational system, a less imaginative one, a more bean counting sort of environment? So the premise for my worry is the persistence of what I like to call the hydraulic model of education. Hydraulic model of education says what happens in a university or in any educational institution is that there's a lot of human knowledge stored in books, and there are a lot of empty brains sitting in classrooms. And what happens, the way you measure whether an educational institution has been successful is how much of the stuff in the books you get into the brains of the students, right? And we all have testing cultures that are based on this sort of premise. Now, some of us have happily joined a workforce that intermediates this process, right? There's a sort of a pitcher where you put the stuff from the books into the pitcher and then from the pitcher into the brains, and that pitcher, of course, is called a professor. So it's people like me, right? And what we do very often in this one-way transmission of information is we lecture. We stand up in front of classrooms just like we're doing here, and you listen to me, and if you're obedient students, you take notes. You see most of these. I don't know where this classroom is. This does not look like any classroom that I've ever taught in recent years, but it's an old stock photo from somewhere. So this metaphor has a venerable history. This is a wonderful quotation from Harvard president A. Lawrence Lowell. Of course, there's a lot of knowledge in the universities. The freshmen bring a little in. The seniors don't take much away, so knowledge sort of accumulates, right? That's a kind of a, the trouble, this is a fabulous quote, and Lowell was a very, very interesting guy. Problem is, I don't actually think he ever said this, but if you go, it's on the internet, so it must be true. I don't know why I'm saying it's not true, but I've never actually been able to find a citation, and Lowell was not a kind of guy who would say sort of, right? So this looks a little fishy to me, but nonetheless, it's the metaphor. And what's the tool that we use for delivering lectures? It's the amphitheater, which was invented about 2,500 years ago for an entirely different purpose, right? It was these theatrical, amphitheaters were designed for performances, not for teaching, right? So now the problem is that with the internet, society actually doesn't need the university they don't need people like me to be the pitcher to receive and then transmit knowledge, because we've got the internet, right? Anybody who wants to know something can get it out of the books. And if they don't want to know something, we can certainly create some structures that requires them to get it. But it's not clear that a lecture is literally a term that dates from the days when students couldn't have books because only the professor had a book, and he stood and he read. That's what a lecture is. It's a reading. So we're beyond that, and I think we've got an opportunity created by the necessity, because I think sooner or later society's going to catch up to the game that we're in, to say, what really do you stand for? Because you can't justify your existence on the basis of the hydraulic model. Okay. But of course, the metaphor, although I could give you all kinds of citations, any of you who are involved in education, I understand we have our local school superintendent here, I'm sure he or she could say it far better than I can, is used to the idea of measuring how many quanta of learning have been installed in the brains of students. But we've always known that the metaphor was wrong, right? We've always known the metaphor was wrong. We've known it at least since the 1st century AD, when Plutarch actually wrote a book called On Listening to Lectures, Peri tu akuein. And he wrote in this, the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled, right? We're in the fire kindling business in education. We're not in the vessel filling business. And, and this is why colleges are such, they're such wonderful opportunities for jokes like this. College is a place where professors' lecture notes go straight into the students' lecture notes without passing through the brains of either. This is this has been attributed to many people. I actually try to, when I put up one of these wonderful quotes, I actually try to validate it. I think this one's totally apocryphal, too. You can attribute it to anybody you wanted to. Everybody is taken. It's not Mark Twain. He's been given credit for it. There's all kinds of, not Will Rogers. He's been given credit for it. This one is a real one from the early 20th century. As it is, professors give too many lectures, students listen to too many, or pretend to really they do not listen, however attentive and orderly they may be. Don't we all, any of us who have ever been either a student or a teacher, recognize that phenomenon? Okay, so my premise is that the internet is changing education. Universities have to decide what reflects their mission and their values. So there are these MOOCs, these massive open online courses, which Harvard offers some of as part of its Harvard X, which is part of edX, and I'm not going to go through the taxonomy of the structures here. But this is the launch announcement. It's a bold experiment to push the boundaries of learning. I don't know who writes this stuff for Harvard. We have special people who know how to use words like this. It's actually not entirely wrong. Reimagine teaching, unprecedented research, and cutting-edge technology. A few too many adjectives in that sentence, but those three things are kind of right for Harvard students and learners everywhere. So the theory in the way Harvard launched this anyway was that what was the experiment in massive open online education was going to be used in part to improve the collegiate experience, the experience of Harvard College students in the classroom. And, the problem is that when this stuff gets into the hands of technophiles, I consider myself a technophile, I'm a professor of computer science at Harvard after all, you discover all kinds of wonderful things you can do with the technology, like tell whether the students are reading. E-textbooks can report back on students' reading habit. You can not only tell whether somebody actually flipped the pages, but exactly how much time they spent on every page. And, there's huge privacy issues. Maybe, maybe not. Some, privacy fanatics, I count myself in that category actually, got very worried when schools started to utilize Google tools for some of this content delivery, and Google was deceptively tracking what what the students were doing. I'm not going to spend any time on this data privacy side of the internet and education thing, but I just want to put the flag up there as something. Maybe we can talk about it later during the question period, or maybe I can at least leave it to you that it's not entirely a simple question, who's getting what out of putting information online and having students read it. Here's, to me, the more interesting aspect, or the thing that requires some imagination for us to think about, certainly us in universities to think about. Students are now used to video and social networks as their communication long before they get to college, practically, while they're still in grade school. They are used to seeing lots of video. We can wish that they would spend more time reading and less time watching video, but it's like saying, the reality is that video is cheap and easy. And they also spend a lot of time engaging with each other socially using the internet and other associated mobile technology, using the word internet broadly in this sense. And so we ought to be able to engage students socially using the technology in a way that is educationally valuable and will serve them well in later life. It's good training for people to learn in college how to actually work with each other rather than to sit passively and listening to the lecturer pour information into the brains of the listeners. People never work alone. This is one of the struggles that we have in computer science is we give people exams and they have to answer questions in a way that is totally different from what they're going to have to do in the workplace, right? I mean, the last thing you want any engineer to do when they go out and do an actual engineering job, if you give them a problem, the last thing you want them to do is not to pull the book off the shelf and try to remind themselves how to do it, or not to talk to anybody about it. But that's the sort of examination circumstances, because the evaluative process is so, if you're going to do the hydraulic model, so dominant in the way it works. Okay, so now we're now through the first third of this talk, substantively, if not in minutes. I'm going to talk about 2 Harvard computer science courses where we've tried to do some of these things that we've talked about. Use video, use social communication technologies, use the fact that information can be gotten over the internet without the lecturer delivering it in drastically different ways. And these are classes that are very, very different. Those of you, there's a gentleman here from the class of '07, I think, is that right? And I don't know if you took CS50 back in those days. Probably not. It wasn't that popular a course then. It's very popular now, and it's really produced extraordinarily positive results, which I'll try to document for you. So the 2 courses are Computer Science 50, our introductory course in computer science, and Computer Science 20, discrete math for computer science. CS50 is a course that I started back in the dark ages in the early 80s sometime, but it's a totally different animal now that it's being taught by someone else and in the post-internet era, and CS20 is my own course. So I want to talk about these 2 courses. So CS50, among other things, in the Harvard context, and again, what's progressive at Harvard may be 10 years behind what's progressive anywhere else in the world. So I don't want to suggest somehow that we are the first and only people who've ever thought about these things. But be that as it may, we're at least partly a Harvard audience. So I'm describing what counts as a progressive thing for Harvard. What's peculiar about CS50 is that we are sort of acknowledging that the lecture is there for theater and fun and excitement and drama, but it's not there for delivering information. There's other media that we can use better for delivering information. So CS50 is a course which is the unique exception to the Harvard rule that you can't sign up for 2 courses that meet at the same time. So CS50 meets whatever it meets. I don't remember what hour, Monday and Wednesday at 1 o'clock or something like that. But you can take another course that meets Monday and Wednesday at 1 o'clock, because the lecture is not the course. The course is lots of other things, of which the lecture is only a small part. And it tracks an edX course. So if you look over here, I guess I don't really have much power in my battery here, but it says over on the right here, it says you can take it free, or you can add a verified certificate for $90. Right? So any of you can take CS50 free. It's started right now, but start is a funny concept in the internet, because it's asynchronous. You can take whatever you want and do it at whatever rate you want. And for $90, we'll do some kind of testing and give you a certificate. There are all kinds of variations on the theme here of how do you turn this into something where, having quote unquote taken the quote unquote course, you'll have something to show for it that's worth something. So here's the actual CS50, the Harvard College course, the course which the edX course tracks. And it has evolved in dramatic ways every year. It shows some of the things in some of the panels, but it's the one on the top left which is particularly amusing, which is that for the first time in history, Harvard and Yale actually offered a course together. So we ran CS50 at Yale, and we ran CS50 at Harvard. And there's a lecturer at Yale, and there's a lecturer at Harvard, but a lot of the activities were done, quote unquote, together, because it's all on the internet anyway. And there was a big fair at the end at Harvard, and there was a big fair at the end at Yale. And Yale students were the teaching assistants at Yale, and Harvard students were the teaching assistants at Yale. And for the price of a few tolls on the Mass Pike, people went back and forth between Yale and Harvard. And Yale could not have put this course together. And to be honest, if the course had started at Yale and gotten as successful as it was, it would have made much more sense for us to somehow clone it and offer it at Harvard than the other way around. So this is a totally unprecedented exercise in cooperation between Harvard and Yale. I can tell you some more of the backstory if you're curious. But lying behind this are these MOOCs. There are all kinds of questions. There are low completion rates. I don't so worry about the low completion rate of a MOOC. I think of a MOOC as being more like a textbook. How many people who buy a textbook read the whole textbook? You have the course with all of its video content and all the rest of that, so you don't finish it. It's the same as a lot of people don't finish reading all the books that they buy. So I think one of the shape-shifting things that's going on in higher education now is, are these video-enhanced courses more like courses or more like textbooks? There's actually serious intellectual property issues there too as well. I mean, when I develop a course for Harvard and teach it at Harvard, I am not allowed to go down to MIT and teach it at MIT in the afternoon. Harvard owns my soul for those purposes. It also owns my soul because, my kids got all kinds of Harvard degrees. So, but that's a different kind of ownership. But if I write a book, I own the book. Right? Harvard does not get a percentage of a book that I write, even if I developed a lot of the materials while I was teaching a course. So actually, this is going to be a challenge, I think, going forward. CS50 has about 800 students in it, mostly undergrads. There's at least 250,000. I don't know what it is from one year to the next in CS50X, the online version of it. Here's the CS50. So CS50 has lectures, as I said. There's David Malin in Sanders Theater doing the oldest stunt in the book to explain binary search, if anybody's ever taken a basic computer algorithms course. He's finding a name by looking in the middle of the book. Is it in the first half of the book? Is it in the second half of the book? If In the second half of the book, then you can throw away the first half of the book and just repeat the same, divide in half, and look in the first half of the book, right? This is an oldest, this is like, people have been doing this since the 1950s, this stunt with the telephone book. And so David does that in class, and it's great theater, and he rips the telephone book apart, and, and it's, the only trouble is, now you kind of have to explain to people what a telephone book is, and it kind of doesn't like work as well, and they're not that easy to find anymore, So he's stacked up a whole bunch of telephone books for future years. But any joke that you have to explain is already so. But still, it's fun. So he's got these lectures, and there's various props that he that he uses. You can see it's in Sanders Theater. Those of you who know Harvard, and any of you who've seen the Ivory Tower documentary, which is about the student debt crisis, which features a guy named David Boone, who's an advisee of mine, who is a guy from a grungy part of Cleveland, who survives and struggles through CS50 and comes out well. I mean, Harvard. Any of you who are Harvard fans, should get this off Netflix and watch it. It'll make you feel good about Harvard. It'll make you feel that a lot of other universities are silly, and so we come out of it better than we deserve, really. But it's about CS50 in part. So what do we have in addition to lectures? There are these modules, which are very, very high production quality little video segments where particular concepts like binary notation are explained with a careful script. And, and they measured, before they started producing these, how long will a student, if you give them a 20-minute video, how long will students watch? And the answer is 7 minutes. And if you give them a 10-minute video, it's 7 minutes. If you give them a 7 minutes, okay, so 7 minutes is the length of the video modules, right? Because that's like the actual stomach capacity of a Harvard undergraduate, apparently. So everything is chopped up in little pieces, and these are very, very high production quality, and so there's no theater to these anymore. These are canned. And then we have office hours. Now, we all remember office hours, right? Professor sits in the office, you go, you don't understand something, you ask the professor or the teaching assistant or somebody to explain it. So this is what CS50 office hours look like. We take over Annenberg Memorial Hall. We've added like massive Wi-Fi capability so that you can have 500 or 600 students working simultaneously. There's a head TF who's got an iPad, who's the sort of dispatcher, sends people off to the course staff off to help people in one place or another. So remember what I said, that part of the point was, how do we re-socialize? How do we socialize taking advantage of the fact that we've got the internet? How do we use it in a way that makes it possible for learning to occur in a more social environment? This is a very highly social environment. And eventually the dean of freshmen got tired of us taking over the dining hall every night, so we persuaded the university librarian to let us use the most sacred of all sacrosanct spaces at Harvard, the reading room of Widener Library, for CS50 office hours. Why not? Nobody's in there at night. So there's a little bit of controversy about this, but this is a fabulous setting for office hours. We have a hackathon at the end. Everybody does a project. There's an all-nighter. Everybody goes to IHOP the next morning, the Pancake House. They bring in Chinese food, while people are hacking, because, everybody knows that computer scientists all have to learn to eat Chinese food with chopsticks, and it's just part of the computer culture that Chinese food is inherent in it, and people bringing their pillows and all the rest of that. We've done this in various places. This is, I think, the iLab. We've used the iLab. We've used the HBS hives. We've done various other things. And there's a fair where people show off the cool stuff that they've done for projects to each other. And we've got balloons and there's a kind of nice carnival atmosphere. Again, very, very social. Very, very social. And, candy and You can see there in the top left, the Google recruiter is lurking in the background, trying to hire kids coming out of CS50. This is like one semester of computer programming, and they're lurking around already trying to get people to be summer interns. And this is my favorite photograph of this, all the CS50 photographs. CS50 is very, very well documented. So the thing I love about this woman is showing off her project, which she thinks is really cool. And none of the other three have a clue why the hell she thinks it's so interesting, right? Like, why would you want to do that? I don't get it. What is, oh no, it's so cool, So we're trying to light fires, right? We're trying to light fires. This woman clearly has got a fire lit. And then there's all this cultural stuff that's just great. So that T-shirt, some of you who've been to Harvard will recognize as being a knockoff on the athletic department T-shirts, right? We have the jocks walking around in property of Harvard Department of Athletic T-shirt. These are the shirts that you can't buy them. They let the athletes use them, right? So the CS50 staff got the idea of making CS cool by having people walk around Harvard saying property of CS50 on their shirts. And it's true. It's true. You walk around Harvard and you see people wearing CS50 shirts, and it's cool to do computer science now. It's so cool to do computer science that, computer science is the middle bar. This is from 07, 08 through 15, 16. So this includes all of the sophomores who just declared their concentration. And we're up now to 348 computer science majors at Harvard. And less than 10 years ago, we were at 69. And this, by the way, you can see the top bar is applied math, and the bottom set of bars is various fields of engineering. So just to plug my own home field here in the School of Engineering, this is a huge change at Harvard from anybody who, left there more than 10 years ago. I mean, probably there are people who have college degrees here who never knew where the engineering stuff was even. Okay, now it's very, very hot. And by the way, course enrollments, including enrollments of people who are not the majors, the graph looks just the same. It's just like this 45-degree angle rising. So in computer science, we've actually got a space crisis and across all of engineering, partly because we're adding faculty and they're doing stuff involving bioengineering and things that really require space. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this class on this, in this talk on this, but the whole engineering school is moving down across the river to Western Avenue, adjacent to the business school. And you're among the first to see these architect sketches of what the space is going to look like. It's going to be a really nice, big, complicated building with all kinds of layers and stages and all the rest of that, and nice, big, open spaces on the inside. And what we've been doing for the last year is sort of looking at each other across the table, the faculty, and saying, okay, are lectures really going away? Because if lectures are really going away, we're not going to build lecture halls in the new building. And they said, oh, well, we might want them, but I said, well, then you can't have all of those other kinds of classrooms, right? There's only a finite amount of space here, and you can't do everything. And lecture halls are extremely expensive to repurpose into other kinds of teaching spaces. So anyway, this is a current. So there's Sanders Theater at the left end there of Memorial Hall, Harvard's great space. And lectures will continue. Michael Sandel's Justice course is a marvel, and he can do it very interactively, as you can see. It's a rare talent to be able to do this. Almost all lecture courses are taught in hydraulic model mode. Okay, so Now I want to talk about my course. This is a course that I've taught for many years, Computer Science 121. It's the theory of computation. And over the course of the years, I've developed a beautiful, beautiful set of typeset slides. Pumping lemma basic version, if L is regular, there's a number P such that da 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 da. And I even made a couple little illustrations there just to make it a little more visual than it was, okay? And every fall I go in and I give my theory of computation lectures. And every fall, this is what my lecture hall looks like. And we realized that there were a lot of students that we weren't reaching. And we weren't reaching them because they don't attend lectures, because we video record the lectures for a distance audience. There's not a MOOC, it's a mini MOOC, a massive, not a non-massive, I don't know what that, TOOC, a tiny open online course, CS 121. So my CS 121 lectures are video recorded, and I let the students have the students taking the class have them. So we could do various things to get the students back in the classroom. I could require attendance. You know, have somebody check you off when you come in and grade you down if you don't come. We could say, you know, at random times, you know, around every 7th class, but not on any regular schedule, you know, we're going to have a quiz. If you're not there, you're going to get a 0 on it. There are all kinds of ways that you can get students if you really want to. We could restrain the distribution of videos just because I let them, the extension school, use them for the distance course. That doesn't mean the college students have to get it. But, you know, these are all, like, hostile. You know, students are not the enemy. You're not trying to trap them or force them to do something that they would naturally not want to do if it's not really an educational issue. If it's an educational issue, then that's something else. And I tend to be like a wacko information libertarian, so, you know, I give all my stuff away. The last couple of books I've written, I've put out under Creative Commons licenses, so anybody can just take the material and repurpose it for themselves. I still make small amounts of money on it, but I'm much more interested in people learning than I am on making a profit on my books. So, but you know, this is when I said it gets to the core of what we're about. Universities we should be in the business of disseminating information, not figuring out ways to bottle it up so that you can get it only if you've got the special thing that we require you to do in order to get it. So what I decided to do when I reworked, actually not this course, but the sort of predecessor course to it in the curriculum, we decided to flip the classroom, have students listen to the lectures at home in their dormitory rooms, in the houses, in the freshman dorms, which all have high-speed internet, perfectly useful for listening to video, watching video lectures. And we just spend all of the classroom time doing homework. So that's the way CS20 is taught, and it's not a new concept. I don't want to take any credit for it. Like, kindergarten teachers have known that this is what you do for a very long time. It only took until, you know, the 21st century for the Harvard faculty to figure it out. But seriously, you know, you remember my picture of the amphitheater. You know, this is what we want, right? This is what we want. This is the School of Athens. You know, they're like people talking to each other and looking over each other's shoulders and, you know, arguing down here on the right-hand corner. And, you know, and there's always one guy, this happens to be Michelangelo, front and center, who's just like won't talk to anybody. He's going to sit there and figure this stuff out for himself, right? That is Michelangelo, in fact. All right, so we got to deal with Michelangelo too. So I don't want to force people to be social all the time, but it's the way most people learn most of the time. So I recorded a bunch of lectures, and we very, very quickly and cheaply converted some underutilized library space into a bright, low-tech classroom, which is just a bunch of tables and a bunch of whiteboards and some power that you can draw to the tables for people who want to use computers. These are nice little reconfigurable paisley-shaped tables, so you can put them together if 2 seats 4 and 3 seats 6 and so on. It's different faculty who teach in there like to have their groups be different sizes. Falls 4, we bring power in. Whiteboards with a daily marker check. That was the one thing I insisted on, that we have a person who actually checks to see that the markers are in order. We have projection. We have controllable shades over the windows. There's a beautiful skylight at the roof. And this is what happens in the course. The students just like, this is not a stage. This looks like a staged photo. This is not a staged photo. These are actual two guys. I know both of them. They were in the class. Of course, I know them. And they're working this problem out on the whiteboard, and somebody's just cracked some joke. And this so looks like a staged photo that Harvard, when they launched the Harvard campaign, they actually used this photo as the lead. We're going to be leading and learning like nowhere else, evolving. I don't know, like nowhere else. Ugh, it's terrible phrasing, but it's those PR flacks that write this stuff for us. Anyway, leading change in how faculty teach and students learn. So here here these guys are. So it's great. The thing is, they didn't actually, they cropped it carefully, because like if you uncrop it, you see, well, first of all, that's Laurent Rivard, who is our 3-point shooter on the basketball team. But there's the professor who's actually reading email while the students are solving problems. I mean, it's a lot of work to do this course, to create all of the materials, the problems that people work on, and so on. But I can actually get a lot of work done during class now, because the students are doing the work of learning. I do some teaching myself, but it's mostly, students are supposed to write their solutions on the whiteboards, and the staff goes around and checks them. Now, I was talking to a student a couple of days ago, and something occurred to me, which is actually serious. So there's a lot of talk now about social alienation of groups of students on campus, minority students and socioeconomically disadvantaged students and so on. And it seems to me that this business of socializing the classroom is part of the problem of getting at what I'm calling academic alienation, which underprepared students. Harvard has a lot of students. It's been very, very aggressive in recent years in recruiting students from not very good schools. That is not the way they would describe it. They say they're going after low-income students, but guess what? Low-income students tend to come from places where the schools are not awfully good. So we have a lot of bright, talented students who are not as well educated before college as what our population was 20 or 30 years ago. So the alienation, when you read about the alienation, sometimes it's distributed to the crushing debt loads, but Harvard students have no crushing debt load. Harvard college students have no crushing debt load. The variance in academic preparation level has increased as financial aid has become more generous, and students who don't feel confident academically are more likely to feel socially and culturally isolated. So I like to think of CS20 and also CS50, and if you watch that ivory tower movie, you'll see why, as part of the de-alienation movement, right? The students who are very well prepared skip over these courses and go on to more advanced courses. And in the classroom, we have a non-competitive, ungraded group work, and it combats social isolation in academic work. We require attendance. We actually require people to show up for class, but we explain to them that's because we're teaching you how to work as part of a team, and it's inherent in working as part of a team that if you don't show up, it's not just yourself that you may be hurting, right? It's your teammates as well. And this is usually a freshman or sophomore course, so the students who take this. This is not a remedial course exactly. I mean, I wouldn't call it remedial because it's material that I never had in high school, it's just, but the people who are on the math team from Bronx Science have seen it. They don't need to take it. And you get the feel, this is the way it is. This woman's a heavy, a rower. That guy with the yellow t-shirt on, he's from India. This guy who's standing up and explaining things is actually a math major who's one of my undergraduate teaching assistants. We use a lot of them. So there's a lot of just kind of talking that goes on and explaining and iterating, and we don't grade people on what they do. We have homework, we have tests and all that, but what happens in the classroom is non-competitive. So here are the anonymous student comments that I got at the end of the term. I found this to be the most helpful teaching method at Harvard. In-class problem solving is the best. More courses should be taught this way. Oh my goodness, the in-class problem solving is beautiful. We need more of it. Even the negative comments are good. The TFs are great. Professor Lewis's teaching is not good. I find it more useful to talk to the TFs than listening to his lectures. Okay, so I talk less and I let the TFs talk more. It's fine. You learn. I have no pride in this. It's okay. I'm glad to know it. And then, he's just, I just love these anonymous. I have no idea who these people are, but somebody tell me what he or she majored in. You might say this class is a kind of startup. Maybe he's an entrepreneur. I don't know. Niches the class's context for active, engaging, useful, and fun problem solving as opposed to class's context for sitting, listening, and being bored. No other class here at Harvard does quite the same thing. I'd love to see other classes taught in the same manner. If it succeeds, CS20 can lead to other classes in that direction. And it actually has led to other classes in this direction. So this is my colleague, Margot Seltzer. She's teaching CS61, which is our systems programming course. She kind of half flips. She kind of half lectures and half does group problem solving. The challenge is finding space where we can do this, because you can't do this in an amphitheater, right? You got to have some place where you can move the tables around and the floor is flat and all that. This is the basement of the Northwest building, for those of you who know it. Okay, but now you go back to the original thing here, are we really doing a better job teaching than we used to? Shouldn't we be measuring it? Well, I'm not sure that I really care, because I'm not sure I know how to measure the fire lighting part, even though we could measure the hydraulic part. And I'd also, in this mode, would like to plea for a little humility in terms of our understanding of what it is that students really get out of a college education. So this is a quote which I love from Harvard President James Ryan Conant: "Education is what's left after all that's been learned is forgotten," right? I mean, seriously. I don't remember almost anything that I actually learned in college at this point. I think in my field, the half-life of knowledge is about 1 year. Whatever you learn, half of it a year from now is irrelevant. Of the detailed stuff, the stuff on which you can actually give tests and so on. And the stuff that's left over is creativity, skepticism, where to be skeptical, where to be a nonconformist, some things about values, ethics. These are things that you may witness in the course of teaching a course, but it's not not the syllabus about, 2 men and a goat in a boat and, somebody's got to get thrown out. Not that sort of nonsense, right? And, my view of higher education is that these are not the exclusive province of the humanities and the philosophers and so on, that we should all be freed as we now are from our information transmission principal objective. We should be doing more of this stuff. And sorry for the special pleading for engineering, but this is the founding document from 1849, what the president of Harvard said at the time it was created, that among the purposes of creating engineering school was to make the laws and mysteries of nature the subject of those original researches which are necessary to give intellectual and moral dignity to the pursuit of science. Intellectual and moral dignity to the pursuit of science, and should be every other field of social science and so on and so forth. Okay, so now, you're a good audience, right? So the last few slides, I can sort of pretend have something to do with the rest of this talk, but they're really just my indulging myself with a little fun. So if you'll bear with me for a few more, I want to talk about how we need to cherish our naughty students. Anybody know which of my naughty students this guy is? Yeah, that's him. So that's Bill Gates. About the time I taught him, he was stopped on a speeding rap in New Mexico and had his mugshot taken. And you know, it's not the standard mugshot photo, like as one of my colleagues likes to describe this photo. That's the "I'm going to own you someday" copper look on his face. Just you wait. So here's the original Microsoft 8080 basic interpreter, which Bill Gates wrote on the PDP-10 at Harvard around the time I was teaching him. This listing is up on the wall in Maxwell Dworkin, and I found it behind a file cabinet back in the late 70s, and I hung on to it all those years. And here's a little bit about the story to this, how this happened. So Gates got a computer account to do research on PDP-11 graphics. And then, you know, after he had it for a while, he applied for a extension of the account privileges. And he acknowledged that most of my time is now being spent on writing cross-assemblers and cross-compilers and basic interpreters for microcomputers. And you know, they renewed his account, but the guy who renewed it said, "Watch!" exclamation point. What's this guy doing? He's not doing the government-funded research on PDP-11 graphics that we gave him the account for. We'll keep an eye on him. And they kept an eye on him, and they logged how much computer time he was using in the months of January, February, March, April, and May, and observed that in February, he actually was using more computer hours than there were in the month of May, month of February, right? There were only 672 hours, and he had logged 711, okay? Because he had like friends who were working on this stuff with him. So they haul him in, and they, you know, so this is my real, when I say, you know, we need to have some humility about, I've given you a grand vision, like I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to persuade you that we have this great plan about social and, you know, video and, you know, and the hydraulic model and Plutarch and all the rest of this stuff. We don't know what we're doing, right? So somebody hauled Bill and confronted him with the fact that he had used all his computer time. I then explained to Bill that I considered his activities highly improper. This is the memo that was written up afterwards. He did not understand the ramifications of activities and seemed totally unimpressed when I explained it to him. He did not understand the ramifications of his activities. I understood the ramifications of his activities, this stupid bean counter said back in 1975. I mean, really, you know? So we you know, it's good that we don't try to constantly quantify and measure. Did Bill Gates get 17 quanta of information out of my class or only 16, you know? Here's my other naughty boy, Zuckerberg. He got himself in trouble. If any of you have seen the Social Network movie, know that he hacked some systems and gained access to, allegedly, according to the Crimson, he stole some photographs and made some stupid game out of them and accused of breaching security, violating copyrights, violating individual privacy. A year or so after I taught him, while Mark was still at Harvard, this is January 22nd, 2004, I get this email from one Mark Elliott Zuckerberg, and the subject line was 6 degrees to Harry Lewis. And it went like this. He says, "Professor, I've been interested in graph theory and its applications to social networks for a while now, so I did some research linking people through articles they appear in from the Crimson, I've set up a preliminary site that allows people to find the connection through people and articles from any person to the most frequently mentioned person in the time frame I looked at." So you see, there was no social network. He created one by going to the Crimson archives and taking names and connecting them together if they were, and you know, that person is you, the most frequently mentioned person, because I had just gotten off 8 years as dean of Harvard College, and I was always, you know, pulling the fingernails out from Harvard undergraduates and doing other stuff that, you know, that was getting my name abused in the pages of the student newspaper the way student deans always get themselves abused. I did all kinds of terrible things to students. You can go read about it. And anyway, it goes to life. If you're dean of a college, you get your name in the paper a lot. So I was the center of the prototype social network, which he wanted to call 6 Degrees to Harry Lewis. And because he'd already gotten in a little bit of trouble over those photograph things, he actually politely asked me whether he could use my name. And I said, can I see it before I say yes? It's all public information, but there's somehow a point at which aggregation of public information feels like an invasion of privacy. That was my first reaction when I saw this thing. So what did I then say? Did I say like 10 grand for 10% mark? No, I said, sure, what the hell, seems harmless, Which was sort of true, but, so I wish all of us who have these educational visions, at the same time as we think we understand what's going on, and we think we understand the experience of our students, and we think we understand what is going to be best for them, that we can have enough humility to know that not everything can be measured, not everything can be anticipated, and the thing that the person who is paying no attention to you at all, I'll tell you one other Bill Gates story. When he was in my class, I actually was writing something on the blackboard. This was before the days of whiteboards and so on. And I turned around, and he was sitting back there where the cameraman is now sitting, and I turned just in time to see him turn the minute hand of the clock so that it was like the class hour was going to have 10 minutes left in it, which I thought was kind of a great metaphor for the way Microsoft worked for many years. All right. Here are, what we see as bad behavior can be good. And I'm just going to close off and open it up now by quoting a couple of my favorite aphorisms from my actual living colleagues. These are not apocryphal. These are things that people actually said. Jim Kloppenberg is in the history department. And he says, our objective is to make lives more successful, significant, more significant, not just more successful, right? We want people to come out thinking that they are doing something important with their education, that they're prepared to do something important with their education, that we have modeled for them and taught them in a way that, gets them inflamed by the passion to do significant things with the privilege they have had of having a great education. And the other, more tempered, this is my deceased colleague, Archie Epps, is dean of students when I started being dean. Most important goal of Harvard education is a philosophy of life. Can you imagine saying today that with all of the angst about the cost of college and all the rest of that? But I really believe this. We want our students to come out with a philosophy of life that brings dignity and honor to human affairs, not just economic prosperity. Yes, economic prosperity, absolutely economic prosperity. That woman's going to make a fortune with that stupid app that she developed, right? That nobody else understands because she figured it out before they did. But we also have a role in, setting a tone of dignity and honor in what we do in the university that we want students to carry out beyond. Thanks.
Thank you. Great job. We've got time for some few questions. If you have a question, raise your hand.
Yes, thank you for the lecture. I'm actually a student of the Div School, so I wanted to just give you just a short little question. I like the bit that you talked about when it came to academic alienation. And I just wanted to sort of ask you, even with your experiences with colleagues, how successful have you been in terms of encouraging underprepared students or students that come from the bad schools that you talk about in attending either the Writing Center or CS Question Center, and really accentuating those resources that Harvard has?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And a lot of this is one-on-one. Students, one of the things that happens when you're alienated is you're lonely. You're not actually talking to people. And so getting people to come into your office and acknowledge that they want to talk to you, or getting the right person to reach out to the person to the student at the right time is a problem, or to build a culture around. That's why I like all of these kind of small group instruction formats. The office. I mean, if you look at you should really look at that Ivory Tower movie. Okay, you can get it for nothing, or it's a CNN production or something like that. And David Boone he's a senior now. He's got a job all lined up at Microsoft. He's going to do fine. This is a guy from a really tough background, and he really struggled in CS50. And as I say, it comes out really well, but that particular story comes out well because the course is taught that way. My worry is the courses that are taught in lecture form where anonymity is a kind of, to use the title of Ted Sizer's book, Horace's Compromise. We don't bother you, you won't bother us, right? And you go along, we'll get you the passing grade, and you're not going to bother me, so I'll have time to do my, book writing and all the rest of that stuff. So it actually requires, in my opinion, this is great. I'm not a dean anymore. I was, dean of the college for 8 years. I was dean of engineering for 6 months in the first half of this past year. I'm now just back being a professor again with, complete freedom of speech. In my opinion, the incentive and reward structure in higher education, not just at Harvard, because it's a professor's, the marketplace of professors is pretty much the same at all, at least what we should not call, but other people call the elite institutions. It does not provide enough incentive for the faculty to take reaching those students as a key part of their responsibilities and figuring out ways to do it. And I'm actually, having just preached the importance of humility, I'm actually pretty proud that Margot Seltzer is doing what I did, because she's just getting the students that I taught a year later, right? She's getting them, the same students, in a more advanced course, except that my course isn't that hard. Hers is really hard. Hers is it's one of the hardest courses at Harvard. So that's the place where people will drop out. So, but she does it out of pride and love, and because she was a student herself once, and and so on and so forth. But there are concentrations. I didn't mean to come here and do a big ad for the School of Engineering and the computer science program, although you can see from those graphs that the students are voting with their feet about where they think they're getting some value from the education Harvard is offering. There are departments where the level of anonymity is much higher, and I think that's a serious problem for the university, which, if I were a dean, I would do something about, but I'm not a dean, so I can just say it's a problem. It's not my problem.
Good evening, Professor Lewis. Thank you for being here. My name is Silo Joshi. I'm a first-year Clinton student. My question is in regards to the recruitment models for universities in higher ed.
Yeah.
You've spoken to the success of your class and other classes at Harvard with this open model per se, but that's not the case when it comes to standardized test preparation and
right.
that for the recruitment of students and low-income students in particular. Do you see this model changing in the future? If so, how?
Are standardized tests going away? Is that the question?
The model of which students are recruited and the value based on standardized test preparation.
Well, so I've got a kind of funny attitude about standardized tests. First of all, so I'm talking about the college entrance tests, the SATs and the ACTs and all that stuff. So again, Harvard is in a privileged position because Harvard doesn't use numerical cutoffs. If you're below, if you get a 649, we're not going to look at you. If you get a 650, we'll consider you. We just don't do that, right? There are no numerical cutoffs. And even though we got 30,000 applications they actually all get read. Some of them only get read once, but they all get read. The ones that get in get read at least 3 times. So we're in the privileged position of being able to use the standardized tests without being slavishly, algorithmically bound to the results they produce. I'm actually defender of those standardized tests, the SATs and the ACTs, because horrible as it is to think, and I'm, with apologies for any of you hardworking high school teachers out there who are thinking about it, preparing for those tests is sometimes actually the place where students learn grammar and algebra and math and so on, which they haven't learned in their high school classrooms. Maybe not even because they weren't well taught, but because somehow this is the first point at which they really felt that they had there was a serious stake. So I think they actually have their role, and their whole original purpose, as I'm sure you're aware, was exactly to get Harvard away from just backing up the truck at Exeter and Andover and taking whoever they had, and providing Harvard and other similar institutions with a mechanism for evaluating people from Little Rock, Arkansas, on something like the same scale that they were using to evaluate students from Boston and New York City. So that still seems to me a perfectly legitimate, worthy goal, but we're lucky to be able to do it the way we do it, which is to take the information and put it together with all kinds of other information that we use.
We've got time.
That's about all I can say. And the bigger question about American society in general, how that's going to adapt, is way beyond my pay grade.
Got time for one more question. Yes, ma'am, right here. He's coming at you with the mic.
As an instructor of microbiology, I'm wondering how you could apply some of these principles that you're talking about with a hard science to sciences that are more soft sciences, and what you think of things like, for example, educational gaming and visualization in science education.
I think those are all good techniques. I don't have a well-developed point of view on it. Gaming makes me a little queasy, but just because gaming very often turns destructively competitive and very male-oriented. So, the structure of the games and all the rest of that. But I don't know, anything that gets people interested in spending time and participating, I think, is worth experimenting with. But it's an experiment. All of this stuff is an experiment. I don't have more of a well-developed picture of it than that.
I want to thank all the people from Harvard that are here. And Chad Brown, thank you all for helping with this program. Let me welcome Dr. Brett Powell, the director of the Department of Higher Education, Arkansas Department of Higher Education. You got the top dogs in higher ed in Arkansas here tonight, so
that's great.
That's pretty good.
That's great.
And I want to thank all our Clinton School students who are here back for the second semester. We're glad to see you back. Let's thank Dr. Lewis for a great presentation.
Thank you.